is the question of Genesis, the origin of things. And interestingly enough, what did we begin with last week? Where did we start? We started with creation, and it was the beginning of all things. Adam, known to you as Adam. Understanding everything is done in parables and allegory. We began at the beginning with the atom, which is interesting. The next thing that happened in our study was the splitting of the atom. And we saw that allegorically when the rib was removed from Adam. So we had the splitting of the atom. As soon as that occurred, we then saw something different in the evolution of man in Genesis, and that was the introduction of thought, which is represented by Eve. The introduction of the capacity to think, the capacity to make decisions. And of course, once then you have the capacity to make a decision, you also have the capacity to make a right decision or a wrong decision. So then we had the introduction of the serpent, which we understand represented that which was the spine, or that which is the flesh. So you see the evolution from the beginning of Adam, the splitting of the atom, which caused the creation and the multiplication of the species, the introduction of that which is thought in the personality of this one called Eve, which means life-giving spirit. And then once thought is established and the ability to choose, we then have the serpent, which represents that which is called the tempter of the flesh. You have to choose that which is good, that which is evil. And upon the first aspect of this, the thought process chooses that which is evil, and so we're no longer in the garden. The garden, which is in the right side, in here is free from all evil thought, so we choose that which is supposedly evil, and actually now we're in that which is the left side, or the left hemisphere of the brain. We're no longer in the garden, we're no longer in the right side. And so you see the evolution of things there. Now, of course, knowledge being good and evil is simply because, for the most part, our minds are just filled with so much that there's confusion. And basically that's what this is. So that basically is what Genesis is about. The atom is the beginning of all things. The splitting of the atom multiplies the energy into life. The introduction of thought is the evolution of the species. The introduction of that which is the temptation, because we are now free to choose. We are either going to choose that which is good or that which is evil. And when we then are at that stage, we then enter into another aspect of the evolution of the species, and that's represented by the struggle that goes on inside of us between the good and the evil. And it's represented by Cain and Abel. Okay? So there is a part within us which is the left side, which wants to stay in the thought process of the mind. There is a part within us which wants to return to the God part, which is the right side, which is evil. And of course, what we find right away is that the left side has the capacity to kill out that which is the spiritual side. Cain kills Abel. So all of these things have nothing to do with real people. They have nothing to do with the story motif. The story motif is simply allegory to talk to us about the beginning that was from the atom, the splitting of the atom, the introduction of thought, the evolution of that thought into a position where we can choose either that which is good or evil, and then the conflict or the struggle which starts to develop within us, which is represented by Cain and Abel. Okay? So then what happens just before we get to the point where we're at now is an interesting thing. It says that the sons of God were intercoursing with the daughters of men. And that sets up a real problem, and it's part of the evolution. We get to the point where there's a struggle going on inside of us because now we have the capacity to think. There is a part within us that's pulling us down, which is the Cain side. There's a part within us that's pulling us up, which is the Abel side. The left side and the right side are in conflict with one another. And now there's a tendency for us to integrate that which is spiritual and that which is carnal together. And that's what it means when the sons of God are intercoursing with the daughters of men. It means the divine principles of the mind are actually being used and circulating or intercoursing with that which is the desires of the emotions. And what happens then when that occurs, this equals religion. It's exactly what it is. It's when spiritual aspects develop in your mind, and they're used actually in that which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. How could that be? Religion has some very good points to it. talks about singing about God, praising God. Those are all good things. Going to church for the most part is a good thing. Help the poor. Don't do some things which you shouldn't do. And those are all very good things, and they're the sons of God. The problem with it is they intercourse with the desires of the emotions. And so what happens? We're the only right one. The rest of you are all going to hell. If you don't follow our way, you're a sinner. You have to be saved by doing it our way. All of those other people in those other religions are pagans. They're evil. They're under Satan. So therefore, you have that which is religion, which has a lot of good points attached to it, totally involved, which is that which is the daughters of men, which is the emotions and the desires to control and to have you totally tuned into them. So you then have religion or spirit, which is consumed in that which is the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? When that occurs, and that's the point where all of you are at, because that's where we've all come through this. We've all manifested. We all came from the atom, right from the very beginning. You were a little tadpole swimming up that canal, and then you impacted at the egg, and you became a human being, and all of this kind of business. All of this evolution came into each one of us, and you reached this point. You reached the point where your religion was involved with your emotions. And it caused a lot of confusion. There was a lot of things that you wanted to accomplish for God, but at the same time you found yourself standing with a church or standing with a pastor or not liking this group or not liking that group and so forth and so on, and the confusion came. That brings us to the next point of the evolution of the species, which says that what's absolutely necessary now is for something to occur, and that's why you see it occur in religion, but not properly. The word is baptism. Okay? The confusion is rampant. The violence is rampant. All of these things are happening within here is rampant. And it says the next thing that is necessary in order to purge this away is baptism. It's amazing that educated people actually believe that you can pour water on your head and satisfy the problem. You got all of this chaos in here, and they actually stick people and dip their head in water. And you would know that the only thing that will happen when you put your head in water is your hair is going to get wet. That's all that's going to happen. That's all that can possibly happen. See? On the other hand, if you'll understand spiritually where all of this we've studied from, where did this come from? It came from the same place, from that same Greek philosophy that said the 5 stages of human consciousness are 1, earth, 2, water, fire, and 5, the new mind. Okay, that's standard almost everywhere in the world, except in China where they have some like wood and different things. You can look that up in your gas skills. This is what's happened here. We've come through the study of Genesis, and in the study of Genesis, all kinds of chaos is happening in the earth, which means the mind. This is the mind. Okay, with all of the confusion, all of the chaos. That which is stated in the Bible says what is needed now is for you to enter into the water. There must come that which is the water. In other words, you must elevate yourself to the second stage of consciousness. That's what baptism is. It has nothing to do with real water. It has to do with the identification, the symbol that's used to identify the second stage of consciousness. You must raise your consciousness, and the only way you can do that, there is no other way you can do it in the world, is through meditation. You start to rise into that which is the truth of what was taught to you by Jesus, what was taught to you by Buddha, what was taught to you by Krishna. You must rise into the second stage of consciousness. When you do, you're baptized. When you rise into that second stage of consciousness, you're baptized. There must be water. There must be a flood inside of you, and it must cleanse away all of the confusion, the interrelationships that you've had with the world, with the systems, and so forth and so on. All of these things have to be purged away. And it only can be purged away by water. So when you take your mind, you enter into the water, which is meditation, you will then find that as you rise out of the second stage of consciousness, you will rise up into the third stage of consciousness, which is